Maya Chun had always been different from other women her age. At 28, she possessed a quiet intensity that made people uncomfortable, though they could never quite explain why. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall with an athletic build hidden beneath loose-fitting clothes, she moved through the world like a shadow, observing everything while revealing nothing about herself. The coffee shop on 5th Street had become her regular morning stop for the past 3 months. She ordered the same thing every day: black coffee, no sugar, and a plain bagel. The barista, a college student named Jake, had stopped asking for her order weeks ago. He would simply nod when she approached the counter and begin preparing her usual. What Jake didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maya wasn't just another customer grabbing coffee before work. She was conducting surveillance, watching patterns, memorizing faces, and cataloging the daily routines of everyone who entered the establishment. This particular coffee shop sat directly across from the federal building, making it the perfect observation post for someone with her unique skill set. Maya had been born in rural Montana to parents who believed the world was becoming increasingly dangerous. Her father, a former Army Ranger, had taught her to shoot before she could ride a bicycle. Her mother, a former CIA analyst, had taught her to read people's intentions in their body language and microexpressions. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a woman who could defend herself against almost any threat. But Maya's parents had died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her alone with skills that most people would never need and a deep-seated distrust of authority figures. She had spent the last 9 years moving from city to city, taking temporary jobs, and never staying anywhere long enough for people to ask too many questions about her background. The reason she was in this particular city, watching this particular building, was simple: revenge. 3 years ago, a man named Colonel Marcus Webb had destroyed her life. Webb, a high-ranking military intelligence officer, had been running an illegal arms-dealing operation. Maya's boyfriend at the time, David Rodriguez, had been an honest soldier who had discovered Webb's activities and planned to report them. David never got the chance. He died in what was officially ruled an accident during a training exercise, but Maya knew better. She had spent the last 3 years gathering evidence, following leads, and tracking Webb's movements. Her investigation had led her here, to this city, where Webb was scheduled to attend a classified meeting at the federal building. Maya checked her watch: 8:47 a.m. Webb's meeting was scheduled for 9:30, which meant he would likely arrive within the next 20 minutes. She had been tracking his schedule for weeks, noting that he was always punctual, always arrived in the same black sedan with 2 bodyguards, and always used the main entrance. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed, and Maya's attention sharpened. 3 men in dark suits had entered, their eyes scanning the room with the systematic efficiency of trained professionals. They were trying to look casual, but Maya recognized their type immediately: federal agents, probably FBI or some other alphabet agency. She watched them order coffee and find seats that gave them clear sight lines to both the entrance and the windows facing the federal building. Their timing wasn't coincidental. Something was happening, something beyond Webb's routine meeting. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "They know you're watching. Leave now." She deleted the message immediately and forced herself to remain calm. Someone was playing games, but she couldn't determine who or why. The smart move would be to leave, to disappear, and regroup. But she had been waiting for this opportunity for 3 years. Webb was finally within reach, and she wasn't going to let fear drive her away. At 9:15, the black sedan pulled up in front of the federal building. Maya watched through the window as Colonel Marcus Webb emerged from the back seat. Even from a distance, she recognized his arrogant posture, the way he carried himself like a man who believed he was untouchable. The 2 bodyguards flanked him as they moved toward the building's entrance. Maya stood and walked toward the door, intending to follow at a safe distance. She needed to confirm which floor Webb was visiting and how long his meeting was scheduled to last. As she reached for the door handle, one of the federal agents stepped into her path. "Excuse me, miss. Could we have a word?" Maya's training kicked in automatically. She assessed the situation in milliseconds. 3 agents, positions triangulated to prevent easy escape, hands positioned near concealed weapons. They weren't here by coincidence. I think you have me confused with someone else, Maya replied, her voice steady and polite. Maya Chun, also known as Maria Santos, also known as Michelle Carter, the agent continued. You've been using quite a few identities lately. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. How had they identified her? She had been careful, meticulous in her surveillance. Someone had betrayed her, but she couldn't determine who. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, taking a small step backward. We know you've been tracking Colonel Webb. We know about David Rodriguez. We know why you're here. The mention of David's name hit her like a physical blow, but Maya kept her expression neutral. These agents knew too much, which meant they were either working with Webb or they were part of some larger operation she didn't understand. We're not your enemies, the lead agent continued. In fact, we might be able to help each other. Colonel Webb is involved in something much bigger than you realize. Maya almost laughed at the absurdity. After 3 years of careful planning, federal agents were trying to recruit her for some operation she knew nothing about. It was either an elaborate trap or the most poorly timed coincidence in history. I'm going to walk out of here now, Maya said. I recommend you don't try to stop me. The agent's expression hardened. I'm afraid we can't let you do that. You're a person of interest in several ongoing investigations. Maya noticed the other customers in the coffee shop had suddenly disappeared. Even Jake the barista was nowhere to be seen. They had cleared the building before approaching her, which meant they had been planning this for more than just a few minutes. Investigations into what? She asked, buying time while she calculated escape routes. Arms trafficking, murder, conspiracy against the United States government, the agent listed. Should I continue? Maya realized they were trying to frame her for Webb's crimes. It was actually brilliant in its simplicity. The grieving girlfriend seeking revenge becomes the perfect scapegoat for a corrupt colonel's activities. Webb could eliminate a threat while simultaneously providing law enforcement with a convenient suspect for his own crimes. You've got the wrong person, Maya said, her hand slowly moving toward the concealed knife in her jacket pocket. We have video surveillance of you meeting with known arms dealers in 3 different countries over the past 2 years, the agent replied. We have financial records showing payments to your various aliases from shell companies connected to terrorist organizations. Maya's blood ran cold. The evidence was fabricated, but it sounded convincing enough to destroy her life. Webb hadn't just killed David. He had been setting her up as his eventual fall guy for years. Every move she had made, every step of her investigation, had been anticipated and manipulated. Even if that were true, Maya said, why would you approach me here? Why not just arrest me? The agent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because we need your help with something first. Colonel Webb is meeting with representatives from a foreign government today. We need someone to get close to him, someone he won't suspect. Maya understood now. They weren't trying to arrest her or help her. They were trying to use her as bait in some larger operation. Webb was meeting with foreign agents, and these FBI agents needed a way to monitor or disrupt that meeting. Maya's vendetta against Webb made her the perfect unwitting asset. And if I refuse, she asked, then you'll be arrested on terrorism charges and spend the rest of your life in federal prison, the agent replied matter-of-factly. Maya appeared to consider the offer while actually preparing for violence. These agents had made a critical error in assuming she would be intimidated by their threats. They didn't understand that she had already lost everything that mattered to her when David died. Prison, death, disgrace. None of those consequences frightened her anymore. I need more details about what you're asking me to do, Maya said, taking another small step backward. Simple surveillance, the agent explained. We'll provide you with recording equipment. You get close to Webb during his meeting, document who he's meeting with and what they discuss, then report back to us. Maya nodded as if she were seriously considering the proposal. What guarantee do I have that you'll honor your end of the bargain? You don't, the agent admitted. But it's the only chance you have to avoid spending your life in prison. What these agents didn't realize was that Maya had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this type of situation. She had anticipated that Webb might try to frame her, that law enforcement might be compromised, that she would eventually need to fight her way out of an impossible situation. The only surprise was how elaborate the trap had become. Maya's hand found the knife in her pocket as she pretended to wrestle with the decision. The agents were positioned strategically, but They had made the mistake of assuming she was just another civilian who would be paralyzed by fear when confronted by federal authority. "All right," Maya said finally. "I'll help you. But I want guarantees in writing that all charges against me will be dropped." The lead agent relaxed slightly, believing he had successfully coerced her cooperation. "We can arrange that. But first, we need to search you for weapons and recording devices." Maya almost smiled. These agents were about to learn that approaching an armed and trained operative without proper backup was a fatal mistake. They had 3 agents against 1 woman, which should have been overwhelming odds. But they didn't understand that Maya had been prepared for this confrontation for years, while they had assumed this would be a simple intimidation and recruitment operation. "Of course," Maya said, slowly removing her hands from her pockets. "I understand you need to be careful." The nearest agent stepped forward, reaching for a handheld metal detector. Maya allowed him to get within arm's reach before she moved. Her training took over, muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice guiding her actions with devastating efficiency. Maya's first strike was a palm heel to the agent's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs and doubling him over. Before he could react, her knee came up to meet his descending face, the impact producing a sickening crack as his nose shattered. The agent collapsed unconscious before his partners could fully process what was happening. The second agent was reaching for his sidearm when Maya's elbow caught him in the throat, crushing his windpipe and dropping him to his knees, gasping for air. She grabbed his weapon as he fell, smoothly transitioning the pistol to her dominant hand while scanning for additional threats. The third agent had cleared leather and was bringing his weapon to bear when Maya put 2 rounds center mass, the suppressed gunshots barely audible over the coffee shop's background music. He crumpled to the floor, his unfired weapon skittering across the tile. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds. Maya stood over the bodies, her breathing steady, her hands rock-solid despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. 3 federal agents had tried to intimidate and manipulate her, and now they were dead or dying because they had underestimated who they were dealing with. Maya quickly searched the bodies for identification, weapons, and communication devices. These weren't FBI agents, she realized as she examined their credentials. The identification looked authentic, but the details were wrong. No federal agent would approach a suspect this way, alone and without backup. These were private contractors, probably working for Webb himself. She found their communication earpieces and listened to the chatter coming through them. Multiple teams were positioned around the building, waiting for her to either comply with their demands or attempt to escape. Webb hadn't just anticipated her surveillance. He had turned it into an elaborate trap designed to eliminate her permanently. Maya pocketed the agent's weapons and communication devices before moving to the window. Across the street, she could see the black sedan still parked in front of the federal building. Webb was still inside, probably unaware that his assassination team had just been neutralized. The smart move would be to disappear immediately, to use the confusion caused by the failed operation to escape the city and regroup somewhere safe. But Maya had been planning this confrontation for 3 years, and she wasn't going to let Webb slip away just because his trap had backfired. She activated one of the captured communication devices and listened to the tactical chatter. Multiple teams were reporting their positions around the coffee shop, waiting for orders that would never come. Maya realized she had a brief window of opportunity while Webb's security teams waited for their eliminated colleagues to report success. Maya moved to the back of the coffee shop, where she knew there was a service entrance that connected to an alley system running behind the entire block. She had spent weeks mapping every possible escape route from this location, never imagining she would need to use them to pursue rather than escape. The alley was empty, but Maya could hear vehicles moving on the surrounding streets. Webb's operation was larger than she had anticipated, involving multiple teams and sophisticated coordination. This wasn't just about eliminating a potential threat. It was about protecting something much more valuable. Maya pressed herself against the brick wall of the adjacent building, her heart hammering as she listened to the increasingly frantic radio chatter from Webb's security teams. They were coordinating a citywide manhunt, deploying resources that seemed far beyond what a simple colonel should have at his disposal. This operation was bigger than arms dealing, bigger than corruption. Webb was connected to something that reached into the highest levels of government and military intelligence. Through her binoculars, Maya watched the 7th floor of the federal building. The meeting was still in progress, with shadows moving behind the partially closed blinds. She counted vehicles positioned around the building: 3 black sedans, 2 unmarked vans, and what appeared to be a mobile command center disguised as a utility truck. Webb had brought an army to protect whatever was happening in that conference room. Maya's captured radio suddenly went silent, then crackled back to life with a different voice. This one was calm, controlled, speaking with the authority of someone accustomed to command. "This is Control. All units switch to encrypted channel 7. We have a compromised frequency." Maya cursed under her breath. They had figured out she was monitoring their communications and were switching to encrypted channels she couldn't access. She would be operating blind from this point forward, relying on visual surveillance and her own tactical instincts. Moving carefully through the network of alleys and service corridors she had mapped over the past 3 months, Maya made her way to a parking garage 4 blocks from the federal building. She had rented a space here under one of her false identities, using it to store equipment and weapons she might need for exactly this type of situation. The storage unit was hidden behind a false panel in the garage's maintenance area. Maya quickly accessed her cache: military-grade surveillance equipment, additional weapons, explosive devices, and, most importantly, a high-powered sniper rifle with a scope capable of clear target identification at distances up to 1,200 meters. Maya had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Her original plan had been to gather evidence of Webb's crimes and turn it over to legitimate law enforcement agencies. But Webb's attempt to frame and eliminate her had changed the rules of engagement. If he wanted to play this game with lethal force, she was prepared to respond in kind. As Maya assembled her equipment, her mind wandered back to the last conversation she had with David Rodriguez. They had been planning their future together, talking about getting married after his deployment ended, about starting a family, and buying a house somewhere far from the military bases where they had met. David had been excited about his promotion to lieutenant colonel, proud of his record as an honest soldier in a world where integrity was increasingly rare. But David had also been troubled by things he was seeing in his unit. Money was flowing through channels it shouldn't, equipment was disappearing from inventories, and orders were coming down that didn't make tactical sense. When David had started asking questions, his commanding officers had told him to focus on his own responsibilities and stop looking for problems that didn't exist. The night before he died, David had called Maya from his base. He had sounded scared, which was unusual for a man who had served 3 combat tours without showing fear. He told her he had evidence that Colonel Webb was selling advanced military technology to foreign buyers, using his position in military intelligence to identify and steal sensitive equipment. "I'm going to report this tomorrow," David had told her. "I have documentation, photographs, recorded conversations. Webb won't be able to deny it." David had died 8 hours later when his parachute malfunctioned during what should have been a routine training jump. The official investigation concluded that equipment failure was responsible, but Maya knew better. David was an expert paratrooper with hundreds of successful jumps. His equipment didn't fail, it had been sabotaged. Maya had tried to pursue the matter through official channels, but David's evidence had mysteriously disappeared, and the officers who might have supported his allegations suddenly couldn't remember any conversations about Webb's activities. The military had closed ranks, protecting one of their own against accusations they couldn't afford to investigate. That was when Maya had decided to take matters into her own hands. She had spent 3 years gathering her own evidence, following Webb's activities, documenting his meetings, and financial transactions. But Webb had been more careful after David's death, operating through intermediaries and shell companies that made it almost impossible to prove direct connections to illegal activities. Maya finished assembling her rifle and moved to the parking garage's 8th floor, where she had identified a position with clear sight lines to the federal building. The meeting on the 7th floor was still in progress, but Maya could see increased activity on the street level. Additional security teams were arriving, suggesting that whatever was being discussed required extraordinary protection. Through her rifle scope, Maya could finally see details of the meeting participants. Webb was there, recognizable even from this distance by his distinctive posture and the way he gestured when making points. Seated around the conference table were 5 other individuals, 2 of whom Maya didn't recognize, but 3 of whom made her blood run cold. The first was General Patricia Morrison, a Pentagon official responsible for approving arms sales to allied nations. The second was Dr. Chen Liu, a defense contractor who specialized in advanced military technology. The third was Viktor Petrov, a man Maya recognized from intelligence files she had accessed during her investigation. Petrov was a representative of a Russian military technology firm that had been suspected of acquiring American military secrets through illegal means. Maya now understood the scope of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just arms dealing, it was treason on the highest levels. Webb, Morrison, and Liu were selling advanced American military technology directly to Russian interests, using their positions and security clearances to access classified information that could compromise national security for decades. The meeting appeared to be concluding. Participants were shaking hands, exchanging documents, and preparing to leave. Maya realized she had a brief window of opportunity to act. If these people dispersed, it might be years before she could locate them again, and the damage to national security would continue unchecked. Maya settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing as she had been taught years ago by her father. The range was approximately 800 meters, well within her capabilities with the equipment she was using. She could take Webb out with a single shot, but that would only eliminate one piece of a larger conspiracy. Through her scope, Maya watched as the meeting participants stood and moved toward the door. Webb was walking with Petrov, their heads together in animated conversation. General Morrison was collecting documents from the conference table, while Dr. Liu was speaking on a cell phone, probably arranging transportation. Maya made her decision. Rather than eliminating Webb immediately, she would follow the group and document their next moves. If she could identify where they were going and who else was involved, she might be able to expose the entire conspiracy rather than just removing one participant. Maya quickly disassembled her rifle and moved back to the garage's lower levels. She had positioned a motorcycle in the garage specifically for high-speed surveillance operations, and now she would need every advantage it could provide. Webb's security teams were still searching for her, but they were focusing on the area around the coffee shop, not anticipating that she would pursue rather than escape. The motorcycle started immediately, its engine tuned for maximum performance in urban environments. Maya had spent considerable time and money modifying the bike for situations exactly like this. High-speed pursuit through city streets while avoiding law enforcement and hostile surveillance teams. As Maya emerged from the parking garage, she could see the first vehicles leaving the federal building. Webb was traveling in his usual black sedan, but now he was part of a convoy that included the Mobile Command Center and 3 additional security vehicles. General Morrison and Dr. Liu were in separate sedans with their own protective details. Maya fell in behind the convoy at a safe distance, using traffic and other vehicles as cover while maintaining visual contact with Webb's sedan. The convoy was heading east toward the industrial district, an area filled with warehouses and manufacturing facilities that would provide excellent cover for whatever activities they were planning. Maya's radio, still tuned to the frequency Webb's teams had abandoned, suddenly crackled back to life. Someone was using the unsecured channel to coordinate surveillance activities, apparently unaware that Maya was monitoring their communications. Bird 1 to control. Convoy is proceeding to warehouse district as planned. No sign of hostile surveillance. Maya smiled grimly. Webb's security teams were focused on external threats, not anticipating that their target was actually following them to their destination. Their arrogance and overconfidence were providing her with exactly the opportunity she needed to document their criminal activities. The convoy turned onto Industrial Boulevard, a wide street lined with aging warehouses and manufacturing facilities. Many of the buildings appeared abandoned or underutilized, making them perfect locations for illegal activities that required privacy and security. Maya maintained her distance, using abandoned vehicles and industrial equipment as cover while keeping the convoy in sight. The convoy stopped at a large warehouse complex surrounded by high fences and security cameras. Maya counted at least 12 additional security personnel positioned around the perimeter, all of them armed and wearing tactical gear that suggested military or law enforcement training. This wasn't a casual business meeting. It was a military operation designed to protect something of extraordinary value. Maya positioned herself behind an abandoned truck approximately 400 meters from the warehouse entrance, close enough to observe activities, but far enough away to avoid detection by security patrols. Through her binoculars, she watched as Webb's group entered the main warehouse building, escorted by heavily armed guards. The level of security suggested that whatever was stored in this warehouse was worth millions of dollars and could severely damage American national security if it fell into the wrong hands. Maya needed to get closer to document whatever Webb was showing his Russian contacts. But the security perimeter made direct approach extremely dangerous. Maya studied the warehouse complex, noting security camera positions, patrol routes, and potential entry points. The building was surrounded by a 12-foot fence topped with razor wire, but Maya could see sections where industrial equipment created blind spots in the surveillance coverage. If she could reach the fence line without being detected, she might be able to penetrate the perimeter and get close enough to document whatever was happening inside. As Maya planned her approach, her captured radio crackled with new intelligence. Additional vehicles were arriving at the warehouse complex, including what appeared to be military trucks designed for transporting sensitive equipment. Whatever Webb was selling to the Russians, it was substantial enough to require specialized transportation. Maya checked her equipment one final time. Surveillance cameras, recording devices, additional weapons, and emergency communication equipment that would allow her to transmit evidence to outside agencies if she was captured or killed. If she could document Webb's activities and get that information to legitimate authorities, David's death would finally be avenged and a conspiracy that threatened national security would be exposed. The sun was beginning to set, creating longer shadows that would provide better concealment for her approach. Maya waited until the security patrols had established their routine patterns, then began her careful advance toward the warehouse perimeter. Every step brought her closer to the evidence she needed, but also deeper into a trap that could end with her death or disappearance. As Maya reached the fence line, she could hear voices coming from inside the warehouse. Heavy equipment was being moved, and she could detect the distinctive sounds of military vehicles operating inside the building. Webb wasn't just meeting with Russian representatives. He was actually transferring military hardware directly to them. Maya found a section of fence where industrial equipment provided concealment from the nearest security cameras. Using wire cutters from her equipment pack, she carefully created an opening large enough to squeeze through without triggering any perimeter alarms. The warehouse was now only 50 meters away, close enough to provide detailed surveillance of whatever activities were taking place inside. As Maya moved through the industrial debris surrounding the warehouse, she could see lights spilling from windows near the building's rear entrance. Voices were becoming clearer, allowing her to distinguish between American and Russian accents as the two groups coordinated whatever transfer was taking place. Maya reached a position directly beneath one of the warehouse windows and slowly raised her head to peer inside. What she saw confirmed her worst fears about the scope of Webb's treasonous activities. The warehouse was filled with military vehicles, advanced weapons. Maya waited until the security patrol was within striking distance before she moved. The first guard never saw her coming. Maya's blade found the gap between his body armor and helmet, severing his spinal cord instantly and dropping him silently to the ground. The second guard was raising his rifle when Maya's knife took him in the throat, cutting off his cry of alarm before it could escape his lips. The entire engagement had lasted less than 5 seconds and made virtually no noise. Maya quickly dragged the bodies behind the industrial equipment where they wouldn't be discovered immediately, then checked her watch. The patrol had been due to report their status in 8 minutes. She had that long to complete her surveillance and escape before their silence was noticed. Maya returned to the warehouse window and resumed her recording. Inside, the transfer was proceeding with military efficiency. Russian technicians were loading advanced radar systems onto specialized transport vehicles, while American personnel provided technical documentation and operating procedures. Maya recognized some of the equipment from her intelligence research, next-generation missile defense systems that wouldn't be operational in the Russian military for at least 5 years. Webb was personally supervising the transfer of what appeared to be the most sensitive items: computer servers containing classified software and encrypted communication systems. Maya realized she was witnessing the transfer of technology that could neutralize America's strategic advantages for decades. This wasn't just arms dealing. It was the systematic dismantling of American military superiority. As Maya continued recording, she noticed movement near the warehouse's main entrance. Additional vehicles were arriving, including what appeared to be a military convoy with official markings. Maya focused her binoculars on the approaching vehicles and felt her blood run cold when she recognized the insignia: Navy SEALs. Maya's mind raced through the implications. Either the SEALs were part of Webb's conspiracy, or they were responding to intelligence about the illegal transfer. If they were hostile, Maya was trapped between two heavily armed forces with no hope of escape. If they were friendly, their arrival might provide the distraction she needed to complete her mission. The SEAL convoy stopped at the warehouse perimeter, but instead of immediately assaulting the facility, they took positions around the building and established a security perimeter. Maya could see at least 12 operators moving with the precise coordination that marked elite military units. They weren't here to participate in Webb's operation. They were here to stop it. Maya's captured radio suddenly burst to life as Webb's security teams realized they were surrounded. Panic was evident in their voices as they reported the arrival of unidentified military forces and requested immediate backup. Webb himself could be heard shouting orders, demanding to know how their location had been compromised. Maya realized that someone else had been conducting surveillance of Webb's activities, someone with the resources and authority to deploy Navy SEALs on American soil. Either military intelligence had finally moved against Webb's conspiracy, or this was part of some larger operation she didn't understand. Through the warehouse window, Maya could see Webb and his Russian contacts arguing frantically. The Russians wanted to complete the transfer and escape with whatever equipment they could carry. Webb was insisting they follow emergency protocols and destroy the evidence rather than risk capture. The Americans were caught between loyalty to their corrupt commander and the approaching elite military unit that could end their careers and freedom. Maya made a critical decision. Rather than attempting to escape, she would use the chaos created by the SEAL assault to get inside the warehouse and gather additional evidence. If Webb's people were focused on defending against external threats, they might not notice one additional person moving through the facility. Maya moved along the warehouse's exterior wall, looking for an entry point that wouldn't be covered by SEAL surveillance. She found a service entrance on the building's north side that appeared to be outside the SEAL's immediate field of fire. The door was locked, but Maya's lockpicking skills, learned during her years of intelligence gathering, made quick work of the security. Inside the warehouse, chaos was beginning to take hold. Webb's security teams were taking defensive positions while the Russians desperately tried to complete their loading operations. Military equipment was scattered throughout the building as both groups attempted to prioritize what could be saved versus what would have to be abandoned. Maya moved through the shadows between stacked equipment containers, recording everything she could see while avoiding detection by the increasingly frantic participants in Webb's operation. She was particularly interested in documenting the faces of American military personnel who were participating in treason against their own country. As Maya gathered evidence, she could hear the distinctive sound of SEAL teams moving into assault positions around the warehouse. Their coordination was flawless, communicating through hand signals and encrypted radio channels that Webb's people couldn't monitor. Maya estimated they had perhaps 3 minutes before the building would be breached and the real fighting would begin. Webb appeared near Maya's position, speaking urgently into a satellite phone. Maya moved closer, hoping to record his conversation and identify who else might be involved in the conspiracy. "The operation is compromised," Webb was saying. "I need immediate extraction for myself and the primary packages. Yes, I understand the consequences. Yes, I'm willing to activate the contingency protocols." Maya realized Webb had backup plans for exactly this situation. He wasn't just planning to escape. He was preparing to implement some kind of emergency response that would protect his conspiracy even if he was captured or killed. Maya needed to prevent whatever he was planning while simultaneously avoiding capture by both Webb's forces and the approaching SEALs. The warehouse's main lights suddenly went out, plunging the facility into darkness broken only by emergency lighting and flashlights. Maya realized the SEALs had cut power to the building as part of their assault preparation. In the confusion, she moved closer to Webb's position, hoping to overhear more of his communications. Confirmed, Webb continued into his phone. Implement scorched earth protocols in 60 seconds. All participants understand their responsibilities. Maya's blood ran cold. Scorched earth protocols typically involve destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses. Webb was preparing to kill everyone in the warehouse, including his own people and the Russian contacts, rather than risk them being captured and questioned by legitimate authorities. Maya had to make a choice. She could try to escape the warehouse before Webb's protocols were implemented, saving her own life, but allowing him to destroy the evidence she had gathered. Or she could try to prevent the protocols from being executed, knowing that doing so would put her directly in the line of fire between Webb's forces and the approaching SEALs. As Maya wrestled with the decision, she noticed movement near the warehouse's eastern wall. Russian operatives were placing what appeared to be explosive charges at strategic locations throughout the building. Webb wasn't just planning to eliminate witnesses. He was preparing to destroy the entire facility and everyone in it. Maya realized she had perhaps 30 seconds before the explosives were detonated. The SEALs outside the building wouldn't know about the threat, and even their elite training wouldn't protect them from a building collapse engineered by military demolitions experts. Maya made her decision. She drew her sidearm and opened fire on the nearest Russian operative, hitting him center mass and dropping him before he could complete placing his explosive charge. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, alerting everyone to her presence and marking her as a threat to both sides. Webb spun toward the sound of gunfire, his own weapon drawn, and his face twisted with rage when he recognized Maya in the dim emergency lighting. "You," Webb snarled. "I should have killed you 3 years ago along with that boyfriend of yours." Maya felt a surge of fury at Webb's casual admission of David's murder. "You're going to pay for what you did to him," she replied, keeping her weapon trained on Webb while scanning for additional threats. "I'm going to disappear, and you're going to die in this warehouse along with everyone else," Webb responded. "The explosives will detonate in 20 seconds, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Maya realized Webb was right about one thing. She couldn't prevent all the explosive charges from detonating, but she might be able to reduce the blast effect by disrupting some of the charges, giving the SEALs outside a chance to survive the explosion. Maya opened fire on the nearest explosive device, hoping to damage its timer or detonation mechanism. The bullet sparked off the device's casing but didn't appear to disable it. She moved to the next charge, firing repeatedly while Webb and his remaining security team tried to track her movements in the darkness. Return fire erupted throughout the warehouse as Webb's people attempted to eliminate Maya while protecting their escape route. Russian operatives abandoned their equipment loading and focused on completing their explosive placement before the charges detonated automatically. Maya dove behind a stack of military equipment containers as bullets sparked off metal surfaces around her position. She could hear Webb shouting orders to his team while simultaneously coordinating with someone outside the warehouse, probably arranging extraction for himself and key conspirators. Through the warehouse windows, Maya could see muzzle flashes as the SEAL teams engaged Webb's perimeter security. The elite operators were systematically eliminating external defenses while preparing for their final assault on the building itself. They had no idea that the warehouse was about to become a massive bomb. Maya made a desperate decision. Using her captured radio, she switched to an emergency frequency that military units monitored and began broadcasting a warning. "This is an emergency alert to SEAL teams at the warehouse complex. Building is rigged with explosives set to detonate in approximately 10 seconds. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance." Maya didn't know if the SEALs could receive her transmission or if they would have time to react even if they did, but she had to try to save them from Webb's scorched earth protocol. As Maya finished her transmission, she saw Webb emerging from behind cover with what appeared to be a remote detonator in his hand. He was grinning with the satisfaction of a man who believed he had won despite the chaos surrounding him. "Time to end this," Webb said, his finger poised over the detonator button. Maya raised her weapon and fired, hitting Webb in the shoulder and spinning him around. The detonator flew from his hand, skittering across the warehouse floor and disappearing into the darkness. Webb screamed in pain and rage, clutching his wounded shoulder while his security team tried to locate the lost detonating device. The warehouse was now a three-way battle zone as Webb's people fought to complete their mission. Russian operatives tried to escape with whatever equipment they could carry, and Maya attempted to prevent the facility's destruction. Outside, the sounds of SEAL assault operations indicated that the elite unit was preparing for final breach of the building. Maya knew she had perhaps 30 seconds before the SEAL teams entered. Maya's radio crackled with static as she broadcast her warning on multiple frequencies, hoping at least one would reach the SEAL teams before they advanced too far into Webb's death trap. The warehouse had become a maze of gunfire, shouting voices, and the distinctive sounds of military equipment being hastily abandoned or destroyed by the fleeing Russian operatives. Through the smoke and chaos, Maya caught sight of the lost detonator. It had slid under a piece of heavy machinery near the warehouse's center, just beyond her reach, but close enough that she might be able to retrieve it if she could get past Webb's remaining security team. Webb himself was wounded but still functional, directing his people with the cold efficiency of a career military officer. Even with a bullet in his shoulder, he remained focused on his primary objective, eliminating all evidence of his treason and everyone who could testify against him. "Find that detonator," Webb commanded his security team. "We have less than 2 minutes before those SEALs breach the building. Everything dies with this facility." Maya realized Webb's timeline was based on intelligence about SEAL operational procedures. He knew exactly how long it would take them to systematically clear the warehouse's perimeter and prepare for interior assault. Webb had planned this contingency with the same attention to detail he had used for his arms-dealing operation. The warehouse's eastern entrance suddenly exploded inward as SEAL breaching charges eliminated the reinforced doors. Through the smoke and debris, Maya could see the distinctive silhouettes of Navy SEALs advancing in perfect tactical formation, their night vision equipment and coordinated movements marking them as among America's most elite warriors. Maya's warnings had either been ignored or hadn't reached them in time. The SEALs were advancing into a facility rigged with enough explosives to level the entire building and kill everyone within a 2-block radius. Maya made a desperate decision. Instead of continuing to search for the lost detonator, she would try to reach the SEAL teams directly and warn them face-to-face about the explosive threat. It was an almost suicidal plan, requiring her to cross an active battlefield while avoiding being shot by either side. But it was the only way to prevent a massacre. Maya emerged from cover, shouting at the top of her lungs, "This building is rigged with explosives. You need to evacuate immediately." The lead SEAL operator swung his weapon toward Maya, recognizing her as an unknown threat in a building that should have contained only hostile forces. Maya raised her hands while continuing to shout her warning, hoping the SEALs would recognize that she was trying to help them rather than attack them. "Explosives throughout the building," Maya continued. "Remote detonation imminent." The SEAL team leader made a split-second decision that probably saved dozens of lives. Instead of engaging Maya as a hostile target, he recognized the urgency in her voice and the fact that she was warning them rather than attacking. He immediately activated his radio and began issuing orders for tactical withdrawal. "All teams, emergency withdrawal. Building is rigged with explosives. Fall back to minimum safe distance." Maya watched with relief as the SEAL teams began their disciplined retreat, maintaining security while rapidly exiting the warehouse. Their training and discipline allowed them to reverse their assault and evacuate the building in less than 30 seconds, something that would have been impossible for less elite units. But Webb's security team wasn't finished. Maya heard gunfire erupting from her left as Webb's remaining operatives tried to engage the withdrawing SEALs. Maya realized that Webb was trying to delay the SEAL withdrawal, keeping them in the building long enough for the explosives to detonate and eliminate the witnesses to his treason. Maya opened fire on Webb's security team, forcing them to take cover and disrupting their attempt to trap the SEALs inside the building. Her intervention allowed the elite operators to complete their withdrawal, but it also marked her as a primary target for Webb's desperate final assault. Webb himself appeared through the smoke, his wounded shoulder bloody but his weapon steady as he advanced on Maya's position. The expression on his face was that of a man who had lost everything and intended to take as many people as possible down with him. "You cost me everything," Webb snarled, his weapon trained on Maya. "My career, my operation, my escape plan. You're going to die knowing that David Rodriguez's death was meaningless." Maya felt the familiar surge of fury that had sustained her through 3 years of investigation and planning. David died because he was honest, and you're corrupt. His death exposed you for what you really are. "His death accomplished nothing," Webb replied. "I'll disappear, the operation will continue under new management, and you'll be dead. In 5 years, no one will remember either of you existed." Maya realized Webb was trying to distract her while he maneuvered for a better shot. She could see his finger tightening on his weapon's trigger, preparing to end the confrontation that had cost him his carefully constructed criminal empire. Maya dove to her right just as Webb's weapon fired, the bullet passing close enough to her head that she felt the heat of its passage. She rolled behind a container of military equipment and immediately returned fire, forcing Webb to seek cover behind a support pillar. The warehouse was now largely empty except for Maya, Webb, and his few remaining security operatives. The Russian contacts had fled when the shooting started, abandoning their equipment and transport vehicles in their haste to escape. The SEALs had withdrawn to safe positions outside the building, leaving Maya trapped inside with the explosives and the man who had murdered the only person she had ever truly loved. Maya checked her ammunition, 1 full magazine, plus a partial clip from one of the weapons she had taken from Webb's dead operatives. She had perhaps 30 rounds total, which would have to be enough to eliminate Webb and his remaining team while simultaneously locating and disabling the explosive charges. Through the warehouse's broken windows, Maya could hear the SEAL team leader coordinating with his headquarters. They were requesting explosive ordnance disposal specialists and establishing a perimeter to prevent anyone from escaping the facility. Maya realized the SEALs intended to contain the situation while specialists dealt with the explosive threat. But Maya knew they didn't have time for specialized teams to arrive and methodically disarm the charges. Webb's explosives had been designed for rapid deployment and immediate detonation. The timer mechanisms were probably already counting down, giving them minutes at most before the building was destroyed. Maya activated her captured radio and tried to reach the SEAL commander. "SEAL team leader, this is the woman who warned you about the explosives. The charges are on timers, not remote detonation. You need to clear the area immediately." The response came back immediately. "Unknown female. This is SEAL Commander Harrison. What's your status inside the building?" Maya felt a surge of relief that the SEALs were willing to communicate with her despite the circumstances. 3 hostiles remaining, including the primary target. Explosive charges placed throughout the building with automatic timers. Estimated detonation in less than 5 minutes. "Can you disable the charges?" Harrison asked. Maya looked around the warehouse, noting the positions where she had seen Russian operatives placing explosive devices. There were at least 8 charges that she could identify, probably more that had been placed before she arrived. Disabling them all would require expert knowledge of Russian military explosives and more time than she had available. "Negative," Maya replied. "Too many charges, too little time. I recommend you evacuate to at least a half-mile radius." Maya could hear Harrison issuing orders for expanded evacuation as she ended the radio contact. The SEAL commander was taking her warnings seriously, which meant civilian lives would be protected when the warehouse eventually detonated. But Maya's own situation remained desperate. She was trapped in a building that would explode within minutes, facing an armed and dangerous opponent who was responsible for her boyfriend's murder. If she was going to survive and ensure that Webb faced justice for his crimes, she needed to end this confrontation immediately. Maya decided to take the initiative rather than waiting for Webb to dictate the terms of their final engagement. She had spent 3 years planning for this moment, and She wasn't going to let Webb escape justice because of explosive timers or tactical disadvantages. Maya emerged from cover firing, advancing directly toward Webb's position while laying down suppressive fire that forced him and his remaining operatives to keep their heads down. It was an aggressive, almost reckless tactic that violated basic principles of cover and concealment, but Maya's fury and determination made her willing to accept extraordinary risks. Webb's security team returned fire, but Maya's aggressive advance had caught them off guard. She reached their position before they could coordinate their defensive fire, eliminating one operative with a close-range shot to the chest before diving behind their defensive position. Maya found herself in hand-to-hand combat with the second operative, a large man who tried to use his size advantage to overwhelm her. But Maya's training took over, and she used the man's own momentum against him, throwing him into a piece of heavy machinery with enough force to render him unconscious. Webb was now alone, wounded, and facing an opponent who had systematically eliminated his entire security team. But he still had advantages: better position, more ammunition, and intimate knowledge of the warehouse's layout and explosive placement. "It's over, Webb," Maya called out. "Your operation is exposed, your people are dead or fled, and those SEALs are going to hunt down everyone involved in your conspiracy." "Maybe," Webb replied from behind his cover, "but you'll never see it. Those explosives will detonate in less than 2 minutes, and there's no way out of this building that doesn't put you in my line of fire." Maya realized Webb was probably right about the timeline, but wrong about her options. She had spent months studying this warehouse complex, and she knew about an emergency exit that Webb's people had apparently overlooked during their security assessment. The grenades exploded with devastating force, sending shockwaves through the warehouse and collapsing sections of the interior structure. Maya felt the concussion wave hit her back as she sprinted toward the emergency exit, debris raining down around her as the building began its final death throes. Behind her, Maya could hear Webb screaming in pain and rage. The grenade blasts had wounded him further, but they hadn't killed him. Through the smoke and chaos, she could see him struggling to his feet, his uniform torn and bloody, his weapon still clutched in his hands. Even facing imminent death, Webb was determined to take Maya down with him. Maya reached the emergency exit just as the first series of major explosive charges detonated. The warehouse shook like an earthquake, and she could hear the distinctive sound of structural supports failing as the building began to collapse. She had perhaps 20 seconds before the entire facility came down on top of them. The emergency exit was locked from the inside with multiple security devices, but Maya had anticipated this obstacle. She used one of her remaining explosive charges to blow the door completely off its hinges, creating an escape route just as Webb appeared through the smoke behind her. Webb raised his weapon to fire just as another series of explosions rocked the warehouse. The blast knocked him off balance, and his shot went wide, sparking off metal debris near Maya's head. Maya turned and returned fire, hitting Webb's center mass and sending him crashing into a support beam. Maya thought she had finally killed the man responsible for David's death, but Webb was tougher than she had anticipated. He was still moving, still breathing, still trying to bring his weapon to bear for one final shot. Blood was streaming from multiple wounds, but hatred and determination kept him functional. "You think you've won," Webb gasped, his voice barely audible over the sound of continuing explosions. "But you don't understand what you've destroyed. This operation protected American interests. We were selling obsolete technology to the Russians while gathering intelligence on their capabilities." Maya almost laughed at Webb's attempt to justify his treason. "David found evidence that you were selling current military secrets, not obsolete equipment. You were compromising national security for personal profit." "David was naive," Webb replied, struggling to raise his weapon. "He didn't understand the complexity of modern intelligence operations. Sometimes you have to appear to betray your country in order to protect it." Maya realized that Webb actually believed his own justifications, that he had convinced himself his criminal activities were somehow patriotic. It was the final insult to David's memory, the man who killed him claiming to be a hero rather than acknowledging his greed and corruption. Maya raised her weapon to end Webb's life, but before she could fire, the warehouse's main support structure finally collapsed. Tons of steel and concrete came crashing down, creating a wall of debris between Maya and Webb. She could hear him screaming on the other side of the collapse, trapped beneath the falling building. Maya had no choice but to escape through the emergency exit as the warehouse continued its catastrophic collapse around her. She emerged into the night air just as the final series of explosions brought down the remainder of the building, creating a massive pile of rubble where Webb's criminal operation had been conducted. The SEAL teams had established their perimeter at a safe distance, but Maya could see their vehicles and personnel positioned throughout the industrial complex. She was emerging from a building that had just exploded, covered in dust and debris, carrying weapons and equipment that marked her as a potential threat. Maya dropped her weapons and raised her hands as SEAL operators converged on her position. She could see their night vision equipment and laser sights tracking her movements as they approached with the careful precision of professionals who had dealt with similar situations countless times. "I'm the one who warned you about the explosives," Maya called out. "I have evidence of treason and arms dealing that needs to reach legitimate authorities." The SEAL team leader, Commander Harrison, approached with his weapon lowered but ready. Maya could see him evaluating her, trying to determine whether she was a threat or a potential intelligence asset. "You're the woman who was broadcasting warnings on our frequencies," Harrison said. "What was your involvement in the operation we just interrupted?" Maya realized she was at a critical decision point. She could try to disappear, using the chaos and confusion to slip away and continue her life of anonymity and false identities. Or she could trust these military professionals with the truth and hope they would help her ensure that justice was finally served. "My name is Maya Chun," she began. 3 years ago, Colonel Marcus Webb ordered the murder of my boyfriend, Lieutenant Colonel David Rodriguez, because David had discovered Webb's illegal arms dealing activities. I've been tracking Webb ever since, gathering evidence of his crimes." Maya reached slowly into her jacket and retrieved the recording devices she had used to document Webb's activities. These contain video and audio evidence of Webb selling classified military technology to Russian operatives. There are also recordings of American military personnel participating in treason. Commander Harrison examined the devices while his team maintained security around the collapsed warehouse. Maya could see additional military vehicles arriving, including what appeared to be military intelligence personnel and explosive ordnance disposal specialists. "Colonel Webb was the target of our operation," Harrison confirmed. "We've been investigating his activities for 6 months, but we couldn't gather enough evidence to prosecute. What you've recorded might be exactly what we need." Maya felt a surge of relief and vindication. Military intelligence had been conducting their own investigation, which meant David's suspicions about Webb's activities had eventually reached legitimate authorities. Her 3-year quest for justice had finally intersected with official efforts to stop Webb's treason. "Is Webb dead?" Maya asked, looking back at the pile of rubble that had been the warehouse. "Unknown," Harrison replied. "We'll have search and rescue teams go through the debris, but anyone inside that building when it collapsed probably didn't survive." Maya realized she might never know for certain whether Webb had died in the collapse or somehow escaped through some hidden exit. After 3 years of planning and sacrifice, the man responsible for David's death might have slipped away in the final moments of their confrontation. But as Maya looked around at the massive law enforcement response to Webb's operation, she realized that Webb's criminal empire had been completely destroyed. His Russian contacts had fled, his equipment had been captured or destroyed, his security team was dead or captured, and his conspiracy had been exposed. Even if Webb had somehow survived, he would never again be able to operate with the impunity he had enjoyed for years. Commander Harrison was speaking into his radio, coordinating with military intelligence analysts who would examine Maya's evidence and determine how to proceed with prosecutions. Maya could hear references to classified investigations, ongoing operations, and national security implications that suggested Webb's activities had been part of a much larger criminal conspiracy. "You'll need to come with us for debriefing," Harrison told Maya. "Military intelligence will want to interview you extensively about everything you've observed and recorded over the past 3 years." Maya nodded her understanding. She had always known that exposing Webb would require her to reveal her own activities, including surveillance techniques and intelligence-gathering methods that might be considered illegal. But David's death demanded justice, and Maya was prepared to face whatever consequences arose from her 3-year investigation. As Maya was escorted toward the military intelligence vehicles, she reflected on everything that had led to this moment. David Rodriguez had died because he was an honest soldier who couldn't ignore evidence of corruption and treason. Maya had spent 3 years of her life seeking justice for his death, sacrificing her own safety and identity in pursuit of a man who had seemed untouchable. But tonight, Webb's operation had been destroyed, his conspiracy had been exposed, and his criminal empire had collapsed. Whether Webb himself had survived was less important than the fact that he could never again use his position and authority to betray his country or murder honest soldiers like David. Maya looked back one final time at the rubble that had been Webb's warehouse. Somewhere beneath the debris lay the evidence of the illegal arms deals that had cost David his life. The technology Webb had been selling to enemy nations would never reach its intended destination. The Americans who had participated in his conspiracy would face prosecution for treason. Most importantly, David Rodriguez's death had finally been avenged, not through vigilante justice or personal revenge, but through the proper exposure of corruption and the application of legitimate law enforcement. Maya had fulfilled her promise to David's memory, and now she could finally begin to rebuild her own life. As the military vehicles drove away from the destroyed warehouse complex, Maya felt a sense of closure she hadn't experienced in 3 years. The quest that had consumed her life was finally complete. Colonel Marcus Webb's reign of corruption and treason had ended, and the man who had murdered her boyfriend would never again be able to harm innocent people. Maya Chun had entered this conflict as a woman seeking personal revenge. She was leaving it as someone who had helped expose one of the most serious national security threats in modern American history. David Rodriguez's sacrifice had not been meaningless after all. His discovery of Webb's crimes had eventually led to the destruction of a criminal conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. Justice, Maya realized, sometimes took years to achieve and required sacrifices from people like David who were willing to stand up for what was right. But in the end, truth and integrity had prevailed over corruption and greed. Webb's operation was finished, and Maya could finally honor David's memory by moving forward with her own life, knowing that his death had ultimately served a purpose greater than either of them had imagined. The warehouse complex disappeared behind them as the convoy headed toward military intelligence headquarters. Maya watched the industrial district fade into the distance, knowing she would never return to this place, but understanding that what had happened here tonight would echo through American national security operations for years to come. Colonel Marcus Webb had learned too late that underestimating Maya Chun was the biggest mistake of his criminal career. He had ordered the death of an honest soldier, not realizing that soldier's girlfriend possessed the skills and determination to bring down his entire operation. Webb had tried to frame Maya for his own crimes, not understanding that she was prepared for exactly that contingency. Most importantly, Webb had assumed that one woman seeking justice could be easily eliminated or intimidated. Instead, Maya had systematically dismantled his criminal empire, exposed his treason, and ensured that his conspiracy would never threaten American national security again. As the military convoy disappeared into the night, the warehouse district fell silent except for the sounds of emergency responders and cleanup crews. The industrial complex that had briefly housed one of the most serious national security threats in American history was now just another crime scene, its secrets exposed and its dangers neutralized. Maya Chun had finally found the justice she had sought for 3 years. David Rodriguez's death had been avenged, and the man responsible for his murder would never again be able to harm innocent people in service of his greed and corruption. The quest that had consumed Maya's life was complete, and she could finally begin to heal from the losses that had driven her to this moment. The biggest mistake Webb and his associates had made was underestimating the woman they had tried to intimidate and eliminate. That mistake had cost them everything, and it had ensured that justice would finally be served for a good man who had died simply for trying to do what was right. In the end, that was the only thing that mattered to Maya Chun, and it was enough. But before she could escape, she needed to ensure that Webb couldn't follow her. The man responsible for David's death was finally within her reach, and she wasn't going to let him slip away again because of tactical concerns or explosive timers. Maya checked her equipment one last time. 2 grenades taken from Webb's defeated operatives, her remaining ammunition, and the recording devices that contained evidence of treason at the highest levels of American military command. If she could eliminate Webb and escape the building before the explosives detonated, she would finally have the justice she had sought for 3 years. The sound of secondary explosions suddenly echoed through the warehouse as some of the Russian-placed charges began to malfunction or detonate prematurely. Maya realized the building's destruction had already begun, giving her perhaps 60 seconds to complete her mission and escape before the entire facility collapsed around them. Maya pulled the pins from both grenades and threw them toward Webb's position, then immediately began running toward the emergency exit she had identified during her surveillance. The grenades exploded behind her, filling the warehouse with smoke and debris while she raced against time and countdown timers toward what might be her only chance of survival. The warehouse and encountered not only Webb's armed resistance, but also the network of explosive charges that could detonate at any moment. She had to find and disable the lost detonator while simultaneously avoiding being killed by the multiple hostile forces now hunting her through the facility. As Maya moved through the warehouse, searching for the detonator while dodging gunfire from Webb's remaining security team, she realized that her actions over the next few minutes would determine not only her own survival, but the fate of everyone in and around the building. She had come here seeking evidence to expose Webb's treason, but now she found herself fighting to prevent a massacre of American military personnel. The sound of breaching charges suddenly echoed through the warehouse as the SEAL teams began their final assault. Maya had run out of time to find and disable the explosives. In seconds, America's elite warriors would be entering a building rigged to kill them all, and Maya was the only person who could warn them of the threat they faced. Maya grabbed her radio and began broadcasting on every frequency she could access, hoping that at least one of her warnings would reach the SEAL teams before they advanced too far into the explosive trap Webb had prepared for them. TEMS and electronic equipment that represented some of America's most classified military technology. Russian technicians were examining the equipment while American military personnel, led by Webb himself, provided technical briefings and operational manuals. Maya began recording everything she could see, documenting faces, equipment, and conversations that would provide undeniable evidence of treason at the highest levels of American military command. But, as she focused on gathering evidence, she failed to notice the security patrol that had altered its route and was now approaching her position from behind. The first Maya knew of the threat was when a flashlight beam swept across the ground near her position. She froze, hoping the shadows would provide enough concealment. But the patrol had already detected something unusual and was moving to investigate. Maya had perhaps 10 seconds before they discovered her position and raised the alarm that would bring the entire security force down on her location. She was armed and prepared to fight, but against this many opponents in an open area, her chances of survival were minimal. As the security patrol approached, Maya made a decision that would either save her life or end it. Instead of waiting to be discovered, she would take the initiative and eliminate the patrol before they could alert their colleagues. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance she had to complete her mission and escape with the evidence that could expose Webb's conspiracy. Maya drew her knife and prepared to attack, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether justice would finally be served or whether Webb's treason would remain hidden forever. Maya made her way through the alley system toward a position that would give her a clear view of the federal building's rear entrance. If Webb was meeting with foreign agents, there was a good chance they would use alternative exit routes to avoid surveillance. She needed to identify these contacts and understand the scope of whatever operation Webb was running. As she reached her observation position, Maya's captured radio crackled with urgent communications. The teams surrounding the coffee shop had discovered the bodies and were reporting that their target had escaped. Panic was setting in as they realized their carefully planned operation had not only failed but had been turned against them. Maya listened to the radio chatter with grim satisfaction. Webb's people were scrambling to contain a situation they didn't understand. They had expected to capture or eliminate a grieving girlfriend seeking revenge, but instead they had encountered a highly trained operative who had been preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. Through her binoculars, Maya could see movement inside the federal building. Figures were moving past windows on the 7th floor, which matched the intelligence she had gathered about Webb's meeting location. She counted at least 6 people, suggesting that Webb was meeting with a significant delegation rather than a single contact. Maya's radio crackled again as Webb's teams reported their failure to their commander. She could hear the anger and disbelief in their voices as they described how 3 trained operatives had been eliminated by a single woman in less than 10 seconds. Webb was ordering additional teams to sweep the area and locate her, but Maya was already moving to her next position. The game had changed completely. What had begun as a surveillance operation had become a running battle through the city streets. Webb knew she was alive and dangerous, but he didn't know where she was or what she was planning next. Maya intended to use that uncertainty to her advantage as she prepared for the final confrontation she had been planning for 3 years.